right, guys, welcome back to Muscle Minds with Dr. Scott Stevenson. I'm Scott McNally. This show is brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. You could use our code ADVICES, and we also have another code now, Scott. It's ADVICES-OATS. With that code, you will get 25% off any of their oatmeal blends. I just ordered.
Those look good, dude. Those look really good.
I ordered a bunch of different flavors, like a bunch of 1 pound bags to sample. And one of them that I'm really excited about is the pancakes and syrup flavor of oatmeal. So I'm getting a bunch of them, and my goal is I'm going to give them out as prizes on the shows, so that it gives an opportunity for the listeners to check them out. But if you don't win, or you just want to check them out right now, go to TrueNutrition.com. Use the code ADVICES-OATS. You can make your own blends and flavors. What's up, Scott? We got a Q&A going on here today. I know you're buying a truck or something later today. You've been talking about this for a while now, and that's finally going to go down.
Note that that's not for resale. You're giving away the True Nutrition Oats.
Yeah.
You're not reselling it, so you're not breaking any rules. So that's, I was going to say, that prizes. Pancakes and syrup.
Yeah.
Put those oats with, like, make the oatmeal or make the oats egg white pancakes.
Ooh. With
that flavor, and I mean, you could get some, like, that Walden Farm syrup is just, I haven't found anything from that place that tastes, it all tastes like they've added, like, let's see how many carcinogens we can squeeze in here and,
right,
and get it past people, because it tastes like there's something, like some sort of like some petroleum-based product in there, like gasoline or oil or something. Nasty.
Yeah.
But that sounds good, man.
I'm excited. I do want to warn everybody here. I might have to hop up really quick if my doorbell rings, because I'm expecting my new computer to be shipped today. It's going to be here sometime today, and if it shows up, I need to go. Otherwise, they won't. Yeah, otherwise they'll take it with them. So I don't want to miss my opportunity to get it. But if so, that happens, you guys will be the only ones to know. That'll all be edited out post-production. Anyway,
you could do an unboxing video.
An unboxing video, yes.
Well, I didn't realize. I look up products and I didn't realize those are how cool those are. So you can, like, have the Christmas feeling vicariously when someone else opens up a brand new pricey gizmo or technical item. Yeah,
some of it's really cool too. Like, so buying the computer, I got these headphones. You got a pair of Beats for free, and you could pick anything from like the $100 pair up to the $400 pair. So, of course, they're all free, any ones you wanted. So I went with the $400 pair. And let me tell you, man, the box was very fancy. It was like you had to slip it out of a sleeve, and then there's like a clamshell, and inside of that there's all this other. It was very nice. Although I'll never look at it again. Yeah?
Yeah. The headphones that I've mentioned on the show, I think, before, that I use to try to let people know that I'm training and that I can't hear them and I don't want to be spoken with when I'm...
I've seen them on your videos. Yeah.
Right. Those... I love those. I mean, they get a little hot. I don't care about any of that. But actually, those have the 100-meter Bluetooth chip in them.
Oh, nice.
And they have this. I apparently have the same chip in the smaller version that's not over the ear, but it doesn't give the same range. But those
100-meter.
And I mean, I haven't like gone outside and tested them. Like, that's with unobstructed, view or connection, no walls or what have you. Or, power wires, that sort of thing. But I can leave it in most gyms. I can leave it on one end of the gym. Literally, you can go out to my car.
Wow.
Go to the bathroom. It's great.
That's cool. That's really cool. With these, I get to the bathroom and I forgot my phone by my stuff, and I'm over by the drinking fountain. It starts cutting out on me. But I try to wear earbuds most of the time anyway, just because I feel like I'm going to destroy my headphones with sweating. So I never bring the studio headphones, and I'm never going to bring these either to the gym. These will. But I am looking forward to going to Vegas because they have sound canceling. And when I get on the plane, man, even if you're not listening to anything, you hit that button when they turn on, and it's like a vacuum. All of a sudden, everything just goes silent. It's like I had this really weird sensation. It was
nice.
Yeah, in my brain, it was great. It's an experience I think everyone should have. It was so peaceful. So I'm looking forward to that in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I'll bring mine with me when I travel to Scotland and see.
Oh yeah.
If that, cause I don't really know, I've noticed the noise canceling because I really put them on and I press play immediately. So I've never really.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about that when I'm in the gym. I've got other things in my mind.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nice, man.
Do you want to get to the Q&A? We can talk about trucks later. We can talk about trucks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, So guys, we were going to have on Dr. Mario Novo, but we couldn't get a hold of him. I think he's having some technical issues. So instead, we are going to run a Q&A episode here, just live. And Scott, this is, to me, this would have been stepping out of your comfort zone as of 3 years ago. I remember that when we first started the show, like, you wanted to make sure you had all your notes prepared for every question. Right. And you now you're like a lot looser, that you can just answer stuff comfortably on the fly. And I really appreciate that, because it's not that you haven't compromised at all, and but you know too, and then you'll be like, oh, I'm going to reference these notes, and then you go and find it, and 30 seconds later you had those notes anyway, and you didn't have to prepare. So
right. Probably because I've done like 150 podcasts where they just get asked random questions.
Right.
And two, like, one thing sometimes, and God, this is going to sound egotistical sometimes, but this happens to everyone who knows a little bit about something. I listen to podcasts sometimes, and I hear answers, and I'm like, oh, you didn't mention that,
Oh, so yeah.
There have been times I'm like, like, this is not all of them. There are podcasts I listen to that I learn a great deal from. And those are the ones I've listened to the most of the time. But I think there's a lot of people that just miss stuff. So it's nice to be able to answer some of those questions on the fly like this. So this isn't so bad. This will be pretty cool.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to see how it goes. Gerardo had asked that question. You kind of got into it right before we started, and that was with thinking of the Ultimate Diet 2.0. Is it too radical for cutting your calories too low? Did you say you're not very familiar with that particular diet itself?
No, I've never done it. It's one of Lyle McDonald's. He's got an entire book based on that. I think that's obviously the second version of the Ultimate Diet. It may be based on I'm blanking on the guy's name who had the Ultimate Diet. I think he may have given it that name because of that. The guy also came up with rebound dieting, and he was Zumpano. I think it may be based on Zumpano. Maybe Gerardo can make mention if he remembers reading that, the Ultimate Diet. So I think that's the name of the guy who created Ultimate Diet way back when. And that one I think I did do. There's also something called rebound dieting, where you had sort of massive swings in caloric intake. So I don't know about the Ultimate Diet in particular, but the main thing you can answer that question kind of generically, and just recognize that everyone is going to be dramatically different as to how much they can handle in terms of a relative change in calories. He says he called it too radical and cutting your calories too low.
Yeah.
You can so there's various ways to look at this. There's one, biological variability. Some people they do just fine, others not so much. And that could be literally a matter of, like, your calories are so low that you end up and for too long that you're scavenging muscle. That's not going to happen to any substantial degree, at least in terms of body composition, over the course of 2 or 3 days, let's say. But you can create a caloric deficit that's pretty substantial. Now, if you go into what let's say is technically 1,000 calorie a day caloric deficit, and you try to hold that, for 2 weeks, which I don't think is part of the Ultimate Diet, then that's going to be too long and too much for most people. So that's just calories, though. On the other hand, you can't think of it just calories, because macronutrients matter too.
Absolutely.
So if you're doing a very low calorie diet type of protocol where literally most of your calories, 50% or even more, almost all your calories are protein, then that's going to be do a much better job of sparing muscle protein as well. So I don't know how he goes back and forth. So you can think of all those things theoretically, and it's interesting because so many people, especially when it comes to the calories, like, how do I set up my calories? Tell me what macros are supposed to be for my diet. Like people ask for a one-off diet.
Yeah, right.
Like in the UK, like just write me a diet, and then, like, this is like some sort of a static. It's like a car that you can just drive around. Well, and then you just drive the same car every day, and it'll get you where you want to go, regardless of your body composition. Well, that's the thing, is that your diet has to change as you change. It's a dynamic, has to be a dynamic component of your strategy to gain muscle mass, lose body fat. One or the other in most cases, one direction or the other. So, So everyone's, worried about, in this case, or in those cases, like, how do I start my diet? And you start your diet based on what you're currently doing.
Yeah.
So if your diet's a mess, if you're just like, eating every type of highly processed food, then obviously you just clean up your diet and try to get back into some semblance of something that's going to behoove you as far as making progress in which way you're going. But if you're eating a diet that is 5,000 calories and you're not gaining weight, and you only weigh 200 pounds, so everyone says, well, you should eat 20 times your body weight in calories. You should eat 4,000 calories. Obviously, dropping from 5,000 to 4,000 is not going to make you gain weight if 5,000 wasn't making you gain weight. You're just someone who's got probably a somewhat fast metabolism, has tons of meat, is active during the day. You're going to have to eat more than 5,000 calories, regardless of what the numbers tell you or anyone else tells you, because the rubber hits the road when you're looking at the scale in the mirror and what's changing. So back to the Ultimate Diet 2.0 or whatever other diet you happen to be considering or following, is you can look at your previous experiences. If you know when you cut calories in a way that may happen there that's too much for you, then you just wouldn't do that. Or maybe you try it and be very wary of it and make sure that you don't kill yourself for months when you knew better going in that wasn't a good strategy for you. But otherwise, you just got to try it, see what happens. And then it may be too low for some people. It may be what some people have to do. There was someone at the Swoley Trinity seminar we did, and I overheard her. She was wonderful attendee. She was just great, and she actually trains there at Armbrust Pro Gym. That's where she lives in Denver. And she was talking to Alan Aragon, and I overheard part of that. I think I was packing stuff up, or I was doing something next to her, and he was listening as she was talking about how when she can't seem to gain weight and she doesn't get fat very easily, but when she diets, she also has to cut her calories really, really low. And she was, for her, that was like, how can this be? Like, you're either kind of one or the other. Either you're a hard gainer and you can stay lean easily, or you can get, or the other way around. You get fat easily and getting lean is almost impossible for you. Well, her metabolism, just as it seems, defends the set point or the settling point, as it may be, in both directions.
I do that too. I do that completely. Yeah.
Yeah. So your body, like, it doesn't want to go either way. Like, fuck you. You're not getting lean. Fuck you. You're not getting big. You're staying right where we want you.
Yeah.
So you don't tend in either direction. And that's kind of where she was. So that's something you would know. You're going to have to move your calories up substantially to get your weight and your muscle mass to budge.
Right.
And you're going to have to be like doing like protein and veggie days, in the last month before your show if you want to get as shredded as you need to be. That's just how it is for you. So
yeah, there's no formula to that, And I think that people want that clear-cut formula, and it doesn't exist. We're all so different. Can I
yeah, sure.
I was going to say, I had a question somebody had written in, and I didn't know where to put it, but I thought this is something that you might have something for, because I didn't know what to say. I know that Skip wouldn't have a great answer himself either. It's just kind of out of our wheelhouse. I said, I do have a question for the podcast. So I have never used growth hormone before. I had extreme carpal tunnel for years. It got so bad that it took me to bad places mentally, especially when my job was working with syringes all day. So it sounds like he had a hard time just like pressing a syringe in, and especially because a lot of them, that sounds like I don't know what you'd be doing if you were pressing syringes in all day, but it would be tedious, I'm sure. He says
doing infusions, infusing people with IV drugs, kind of thing.
He says
you got to go real slow. Anyway,
I don't want to ever experience that again. I had some new type of surgery where they entered the palm of my hand and put a shaft down it using ultrasound, and then cutting the tendon by putting a blade down that shaft. With this type of surgery, I was back in the gym within 3 days. Since I have had that surgery and have been pain-free for a year now. including getting at least 50% of the feeling back in my fingers. And I am now immune to am I now immune to getting the carpal tunnel feelings? Or is this feeling actually caused by something else when it comes to growth hormone use? So it sounds like he's interested in using growth hormone. He's had a severe history of carpal tunnel. He seems to currently be, cured, basically. He's wondering, I guess, what is it about growth hormone that can cause such side effects to create like a carpal tunnel like effect?
First, I would ask his doctor. I mean, that's a carpal tunnel release of some sort, and I don't know exactly. He said it was a new procedure, but they've been doing those for a while, I believe. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, basically, the carpal tunnel is just the connective tissue pathway here where the median nerve passes through. Mm-hmm. And when there can become compression in there, and probably the main mechanism, or one of them at least, with growth hormone, because it comes and goes when people start and stop, is water retention. So you have water retention everywhere, and some people that pathway through which the nerve passes is just narrower than others. So, and it's, there's not a whole lot of flow through there in terms of the interstitial fluid that can be retained when someone's retaining water for whatever reason, be it growth hormone or something else, renal failure or whatever it is. So COPD, there's a bunch of things that could cause, or just going out to the all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet and having a bunch of sodium and MSG could do it. Yeah. So that is probably the mechanism. So if they release that, if they completely basically freed up that pathway, so that there's water is not going to accumulate there and cause those compressive symptoms, you can have that in other nerves elsewhere in the body due to water retention. Then he's probably good to go. But I would just check with his doctor. The other thing about growth hormone, maybe that some people know. It's funny because some people know that certain types of growth hormone cause the carpal tunnel with them, and others don't. They get certain side effects with different growth hormones, and I think that's probably not just a function of the strength. One's actually 5 IUs per vial, and the other one's actually 12 or what have you. It's probably, some of the conformation of the molecule that I talked about previously. How well it was made. It's 3-dimensional conformation. It's tertiary conformation, and some chemical modifications that happen to some of the amino acids where they can become sulfated or methylated. They'll basically change it so that it becomes effectively a slightly different molecule. So when it binds to the growth hormone receptor, just like different drugs can bind to the same receptor and cause different effects. Right. Growth hormone, based on how well it was produced in the lab, or how well it was, what preservatives might or might not have been used, or exposure to heat or other chemicals, could bind to those receptors, its receptor, in a different way, and in one case cause more water retention than another particular brand, off market or not. So it's possible, it could be, depending on what happened with this surgery, that because growth hormone preferentially increases protein synthesis in connective tissue. Okay. So if I'm just I'm throwing all the ideas out in my head. Yeah, yeah. If that was just kind of a partial release, because obviously you don't want to that connective tissue there. Is there intentionally, because otherwise when you flex your arm like this, those tendons would be popping out. It's holding them down in place. Okay. Yeah. You need to have those there. Otherwise, your tendons would just look like wires, connecting, and everything would be bulging out. And you can actually see, people will have differences in the tendons on their hands, on different sides based on how that connective tissue is conformed. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Huh. So if that wasn't completely released, and it probably didn't, but maybe they did, and maybe he has a connective tissue disorder or something like that he's not even aware of. People have those where he has some sort of hyper proliferation of connective tissue, which just happens to have thicker connective tissue. There's a friend of mine actually here in Florida who's had to have a bunch of hand surgeries recently. And it was just this bizarre series of hand surgeries, and he's not he's not doing he's not getting overuse injuries. He's not doing a bunch of work with his hands and fingers. He's doing some repetitive motion on a factory line or some shit like that.
Yeah.
Just getting all these weird, really expensive, painful hand surgeries.
Huh.
And I thought, I'm like, dude, maybe you should get a DNA analysis done and see if you have any of these connective tissue disorders. And actually, I found, I just, because this is what I do, I went and I dug into the research and I found, I think, a case study connecting a connective tissue disorder with one of the odd hand pathologies that he had to have corrected surgically.
I'll be damned, huh?
Yeah. So anyway, so this aponeurosis is called, this band that they release.
Mm-hmm.
If that is, for whatever reason in him, like all of his other connective tissue, the person who's asked this question, maybe something that will grow more readily when and if he were to use growth hormone, super physiological levels, he might be someone who gets a really rapid thickening of connective tissue, and that might end up, causing the growth of the carpal tunnel symptoms, the carpal tunnel syndrome that he once had before, because he just would thicken that back up.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the surgery was, and I'm just speculating about the genetic issue. But the thing that's nice about the carpal tunnel for almost everybody is, what do I do about the carpal tunnel? It's people I want to take diuretics, or you can just stop using the growth hormone and it goes away.
God forbid, man. God forbid.
I know, right. And not everyone gets that. Some people won't get it at all. They could use whatever they want, and they're getting good fat loss.
Yeah.
There have been two people, one guy's a pro. Blanking on his name. I don't know if I should say the person's name. He just recently retired. He actually had some illness. He had I think maybe some kidney issues, some physical maladies that he had to stop bodybuilding. But he was a total freak.
Yeah,
really short, almost like too thick, so much muscle mass that it took away from his aesthetics.
Yeah,
you're like, dude, you're just a fucking monster. But he was 5'2" and 240 pounds, just too much. But I'd seen this in him and another guy who was a very big national caliber bodybuilder who had pointed ears.
Okay.
And one of the things I've heard some people say, I don't want to insinuate, but I've heard some people say, and I've noticed this myself, is that people who respond really well to growth hormone, especially as far as fat loss, seem to be general way very good responders, and they'll get really rapid connective tissue growth, which includes cartilage too.
We talked about that a long time ago. You mentioned that ears and nose. You said
hands, feet, the gap in people's teeth. Sometimes you'll see, and then the pointed ears thing. Something I saw, and I'm like, and I one of the guys, probably because this guy was always ridiculous. It's just total freak all the time. I never saw when he didn't look like he was a week out from a show, but I never hardly saw him compete.
Yeah,
and maybe that he was probably using everything. I'm guessing. I don't know, but and the other guy that I heard about from someone who knows him personally said he used a lot of growth hormone, but pointed ears, he got growth there. So maybe there's some elf genes that were kind of brought into play here.
Recessive elf genes.
That was pretty crazy. Yeah. Growth hormone activated elf genes.
I'd be curious to see his pictures from, say, a decade ago in comparison,
That's what I did. I went back.
Oh, you did?
There. And the one guy, couldn't find it in the other guy, the pro that since retired, I think, but the other guy, I didn't see them.
Huh.
And, and my other friend confirmed that. So,
wow.
Yeah, so that was something that was very odd. But, so people who tend to get, they're just they'll start prepping and they'll throw in the farm grade growth hormone. All of a sudden, it's just it's they're dropping 5 pounds of fat a week.
Yeah,
those are the people who you also will see the skeletal changes in terms of connective tissue and maybe a change in their face and those sorts of things.
So be careful what you wish for, is what you're saying.
It's a trade off if you don't care, if you don't give a shit. Yeah. And then some people, of course, there probably are people who get great fat loss, they don't get that, but that's just kind of a trend. When everyone says, man, the people whose the growth hormone is just magical, those are the ones. Seems like I've noticed that, and I'm looking for it, so I've got there's probably some confirmation bias going on here, but it makes sense physiologically as well, that if you've got if you're set up in the various ways that someone could be in terms of growth hormone receptor and whatever you're using and the amount you're using to get good fat loss, that you'd also get all the other biological effects of growth hormone to come with it. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on that.
Yeah. Got here question wise.
Let's see. We had one on muscle rounds. Let's see. I'll post this up here. He says, can you do muscle rounds on bicep curls if the muscle is isolated, like preacher curls, or is that too much of a weight? I'm not sure what that means.
Sorry, I got distracted. Someone, Austin Hunsucker here, said one of his committee members is Jill Slade, who I know from back in Georgia.
Oh yeah,
yeah. She was there when I was there, and she came back and worked with Gary there after I was gone. Anyway, she's first. Funny, this is cool. He said he first dug into Dudley's work. Gary Dudley was my mentor.
Oh really?
Because of me, because I had mentioned him, I guess, or so small world. Okay, so question is, Gerardo asked, can you do muscle rounds, bicep curls if the muscle is isolated? Oh, there it is. Look at that. Oh, are you putting that up? That was cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You normally don't see that. Yeah.
Oh, that was badass.
Yeah.
Isolated. No, that's absolutely. I don't know what he means by too much of a weight.
Maybe I don't know if he means like maybe it would be too heavy to do a muscle round with for him or something. I don't know.
Unless the pink dumbbells are too heavy for you, you can't find anything lighter.
Yeah.
Then no, you're good. Yeah. Okay. Too much of a weight. Maybe he meant weight, like not as in load, but as in weighting. No, there's nothing wrong with that at all. You can do them unilaterally that way. So that's just fine. I don't do very many preacher curls, to be honest.
Yeah, why is that? You just don't feel it right, or?
When I get near full extension like that on a lot of those preacher curls machines, and I'm still kind of loaded, it doesn't feel very good on my biceps tendon, my elbows.
Yeah.
I prefer like a spider curl or a Scott curl.
What's a Scott curl?
So. Basically, Larry Scott came up with those. It's like a spider curl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I noticed a lot of guys that have good biceps. Because in the past I've gone all the way down and gotten that full range, and then I've seen a lot of guys that have really good arms. I mean, part of that's genetics, but they don't necessarily have to go all the way down to get a good workout in. So I've started adopting that a little bit more and just kind of bringing my arm down to what's comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, there are some data suggesting that full range of motion is better than partial.
Okay,
But the thing is that if you feel like you connect better with the muscle and you're activating the muscle better when you're not doing the full range of motion, so that's gonna, whether or not that full range. This is actually a great topic to kind of dig into. So if you have particular research that shows, for instance, on squats, that full range of motion is better for overall development of the quad musculature than partial range of motion, or vice versa, whatever it may be. That research is going to be applicable specifically to that exercise or the exercises used in training. So, because every exercise is going to have a loading curve that it is or is not, or could be just partially be well matched to your strength curve. That's just a fancy way of saying, does it load the muscle through the range of motion in a way that feels like the machine's meant to do what you're asking it to do.
Okay.
You sit down on some machines and you're weak here and it doesn't produce much force, and you feel it, but it's not giving you much effort. And then as you go up, because it's got a cam or what have you, it's an Autos machine. That was kind of the idea behind those cams, that you could come up with like a universal cam that would change the axis of rotation throughout the range of motion of a rotating machine to match the strength curve, but it doesn't match everyone. So you have to use different shaped cans, conch shell axes, in order to match the different strength curves. But some machines are just badass that just feel really good like that.
Okay.
Because they match. You can do things and change sometimes to match, and sometimes you can do it where it fucks up. So if you were to say, if you want to take this idea of partial versus full range of motion, and with one particular exercise, and you're comparing an exercise where you have a really good match between the loading of the exercise across the range of motion and most persons, or in particular your strength across the range of motion, meaning it loads you where you're a lot where you're strong and not as much where you're weak.
Right.
For training that muscle, then that's probably going to give an advantage to full range of motion for that exercise because it loads really, really well through full range of motion. On the other hand, if, let's say, you pick an exercise, and like this could be like a biceps curl, where for whatever reason, maybe it just feels odd and you tend to like want to deactivate when you're near closer to full extension at the elbow, and you don't get a good mind-muscle connection, you're just not training that target musculature very well during a good part of the range of the motion because the exercise doesn't feel right, the loading and the strength curves don't match, then you're basically you're wasting time. You're not getting effective loading during a good part of that range of motion, and you would be better to sample that exercise through the range of motion where you feel a good connection, in my opinion. And I haven't seen anyone do this where they've, you could literally make the comparison by setting up machines with cams that do match strength curve. Like, for instance, on knee extension, people can produce the most torque at about 60 degrees of knee flexion, something like that, I believe. So not a full 90 degree, but not straight out, but like 60. So you could, and you can see that when you do isokinetic testing. So you'd make a machine, and some leg extensions do this really well, that would match really well. And then you'd have another condition where you'd have like the most fucked up leg extension machine that you'd never use because it's just like, it's diabolically easy where you're strong, and it's really fucking hard places where you're not very strong, and it just feels like just awful.
Yeah.
You would even know, you wouldn't even do that. Like intuitively, like, I'm not going to use this because it's not loading the muscle when I'm lifting and lowering the weight in a way that matches where I'm strong. It's just like, it's not a good groove.
Yeah.
It would be like a better example is a pull down machine. So on most pull downs or rows, you're weakest when you're in the fullest amount of shoulder extension, or the elbows are closest to the body.
Okay.
So at the end of the range of motion is where most people are weakest. So good machines match that, and there's some unloading that happens at the end.
Okay.
You don't make it like really hard where you're weak.
Yeah.
And that's where people get a lot of that's where they can feel the contraction the best in the back as well. So a good row machine just like lets you like have those grinder reps. You can see this because when you get to the end of the set, instead of getting here and then you have this sticking point. Yeah. Basically what I'm talking about. The machine is then letting up perfectly for you, so you can have that grinder rep as you fatigue. So your reps slow down until finally you just die, as opposed to go, and then the fatigue hits you and you get to the sticking point, and then that's it. Yeah. Yeah, and you still add some more in the tank, but not enough to get past the sticking point because the machine's so poorly engineered to match strength curves. So you could set up a study where you compare machines with partial and full range of motion. Yeah. And I bet the machine with good loading to strength curve matching would be you'd be better off doing full range of motion on those. And then the machine with crappy loading curve to strength curve, but there is some part of that does match well. Those machines would probably be better to use only during the part of the strength curve where it matches well. Yeah. Because the rest of it would feel like shit. Yeah. Right? So, and that's why like some people would do partial in-kind bench presses because they just, and this may not even be a biomechanical thing, it may just be something that's more neurological, but they feel like when they go all the way down, they lose the connection with their pecs. Yeah. They don't. It's not a pec exercise when the bar is in those last, 4 to 6 inches above their chest.
Right.
Chris Cormier, however you say his name, he was notoriously strong on almost everything, but he didn't do his incline presses like that. So people would give him shit like he just did like a set of 8 with 495.
Yeah.
Incline barbell press, but he's stopping like 4 inches shy of his chest. Like, well, those weren't full range of motion. It's like, who gives a shit? Look at his chest.
Right.
His chest was badass. So he did that, I'm sure, because he was an intuitive trainer.
Yeah.
Just like he was a very intuitive poser. For him, it was, connect with what the body is telling you. And that's why he did them in that way. And some people, can go the other way around. So, as far as so he's asked this question about the weight, and that's why I don't like the preacher curls. I just don't feel like they, the loading curve on those doesn't match. It doesn't even really kind of feel safe, and it tends to aggravate whatever tendonitis that I would ever have. I don't have anything right now, but I do get biceps tendonitis, and I find I can work through that as long as I don't do any bicep curling where I'm near full extension. So, anyway, that's a long sort of trip around.
I like that. It kind of answered a question that I've been thinking about. It was a topic I'd been considering putting on one of the shows at some point. I think a lot of times whenever we talk about bodybuilding, we talk about what's the best way to grow the most amount of muscle. We always talk about free weights and the benefits of using free weights. And I had thought about posing the question at some point about the benefits of a machine over free weights. Because there are benefits to machines. I thought that, and I feel like you kind of, in a way, you started almost getting into that right there with the way that you load a muscle. If you had a cam or the way a machine was designed, that it would allow you to almost ease off a little bit at the end where you're weaker and you can get that harder contraction right there. That would be a benefit to a machine that you wouldn't necessarily have with a free weight. Am I right?
Yeah. This is like the eternal question people will always sort of ask. There was a study, and I cite this in the Fortitude training book, that was pretty cool. I believe it was an isometric elbow flexion. So people were holding the weight at like 90 degrees elbow flexion, just like an isometric curl. Yeah. And in and they were measuring EMG. So, take that for what it's worth. But they were, in one case, it's a free weight, just holding a load, 50 pounds or 30 pounds, whatever it was, that some percentage of a 1 rep, or probably a maximal voluntary contraction for that isometric hold. And the other condition, they were just maintaining that same upward force, or that same elbow flexion force. And in order to hold the load as a free weight, there was a higher EMG in the muscle, which suggests same load but greater activity during free weights. So there's something going on during free weights, and it's interesting because you're going to have also accessory muscles there, stabilizing at the shoulder because you don't want the weight to fall to one side or the other. So you're going to have some other activity there. But something about that instability increases the activity in the muscle. This isn't like a highly complex skill here. We're not talking about doing Olympic snatches or something like that, barbell snatches. It's just holding a weight. Yeah. So free weights can potentially cause more activity just even with the same load, external load, just because of the instability brought on by the free weights. So now that doesn't you can't take that and universalize it. For instance, they've also done like some of the Bosu ball. Okay. Remember when everyone was using Bosu balls and you look at do dumbbell presses and flies on a Bosu ball, and those will actually, you're so unstable, those will actually decrease. I bet maximal activity, because those just throw people off.
I bet because you can't lift
same loads.
Exactly, yeah.
And even with the same loads, things are all over the place. So you can have too much. So free weights have their advantage there. I think a lot of what happens with free weights. Think about it this way: what's the lift? When I heard someone say this on another podcast, I'm going to steal the line, but. So if you ask someone, how long you've been lifting, and they say, 4 years, and you ask if it's a guy, and you say, how long you've been bench pressing, and they'll say 4 years. Yeah. Because everyone that's the first lift you do. It's the first lift you go and do in the gym the first time you go and lift.
Pretty much either that or a curl, one of the two.
Right. So So that's the marker of strength. So free weights are basically they're exposing you and your level of strength to everyone around you. And we are social animals.
Yeah,
we're competitive animals, especially in the gym. So you can, if you are picking up a free weight, and like how many times you've seen like there are a lot of strong women out there are stronger than guys, and guys just, if they're getting outlifted by a woman on a free weight, they're gone. Yeah. But if there were two like knee extensions side by side, and you've got, I think this is partly why they even put the encasings around the stacks a lot of times.
I could see that, yeah.
I think it's absolutely there. There was actually a line of equipment that I was able to I used it. It was a physical therapy line of equipment that they produced intentionally. So they wanted to keep the clients or the patient's minds out of, and it's bad Mario's not here because he probably knows what this one is, but that has an impact on people. When they see those numbers, they see them climbing, like during rehab, like you can have impressive strength gains. You come off of a knee surgery and, maybe you've been casted for a while. You could be pretty weak, but you can get that strength back really, really quickly. Yeah. But there's a psychological effect. Some people they get a little bit concerned when they use 30, whatever 30 is, pounds, kilos. They don't even know what that, but then they go to 50 the next time. It's like, that's a big jump, isn't it?
Sure.
Should we really be doing that?
Sure.
So in order to avoid that, this machine was pretty cool. It had just one giant weight. One gigantic block of steel. Huh. And all you did was slide a lever back and forth to adjust the load.
Oh, wow.
And it would just change the leverage. So, if you were going to go to the, and I don't even know, I think it actually gave pounds, or maybe it just had like numbers like 1 through 20. Mm-hmm. You could actually convert that, but it didn't really matter.
Yeah.
And so if you put it down towards 20, when you lifted that, it was like a giant block of steel. It would lift obviously a higher amount. You do more work and required more force to do more work.
Yeah. That's crazy. Huh.
Yeah. And like if you had on the lowest setting, the thing like the weight would just barely be moving, but you really would never notice. So like it was like if you moved a substantial amount, even the weight wasn't moving much more than even 6 inches when you're using the maximal load. Huh. It was such a big friggin' monster.
Yeah.
So back to free weights, people are in the gym, and I think what we're seeing what you see is that the people who are naturally strong and who like to challenge themselves and like to have the bravado and want to be seen as being naturally strong will gravitate towards free weights because they can show off.
Sure, that makes sense.
They can test themselves and they can be competitive.
Yeah.
Whereas no one will know what you're doing if you're using a machine.
Right.
You can kind of hide it, Yeah. It's all like behind closed doors when you're just putting pins in there. To some degree, people can obviously look and tell. So that's, I think, why you see the people who gravitate towards free weights have a different mindset towards lifting. They want to get as big and fucking strong as possible for the most part. You don't see people squatting with barbells who are just kind of like, la-di-da-di-da, like I'm just kind of in it, it's just the kind of tone.
No, you don't. You do.
You don't. You don't see them doing deadlifts or like they use machines.
Yeah.
It's just what they do.
I'm still imagining that physical therapy equipment, if that was one solid block, I feel bad for the people that have to move those machines.
I know.
Because you can't take those things apart. That sounds brutal. Yeah. It does.
Yeah, I have to look that up. I could probably find it. This was a long time ago. Maybe, machines come and go, but it was interesting. I'm like, and this was like 1993.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'd been in the gym only like 15 years or 12 years by that time, but I'd never seen anything like that. Yeah. So anyway,
we've got a few more questions here that listeners have posted up. Looks like we have a fat burner question here for fat loss. James Hastings, he says, best compounds for weight loss, Clen, Albuterol, DMP, Cardarine, or HGH frag. What negative effects does Clen or Albuterol have on the heart? Do any of these compounds affect the visceral fat more than others? That's it.
So weight loss, James.
Weight loss.
On you for using weight loss.
Just stop eating, and you can lose weight that way, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he's asking a huge question here. It's going to vary. Like we just covered the HGH thing. Some people do really well with that. Others don't.
Yeah, he said frag in particular, which is just
HGH frag. Yeah, the fragment.
And I want to say too. Yeah, I want to say too. Someone was just asking me about that, Scott, and this is total side story. I've never had, I don't know anybody who's gotten really into HGH frag. I've never heard of a pro bodybuilder telling me oh, that was the secret. You know what I mean? I've never, I feel like there's a lot of guys that mess around with a lot of the research stuff. You could spend a lot of money too on stuff like HGH fragment. My thought would be, why not just go to real HGH, get all the effects, and probably end up spending the same amount of money. That side story, but I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, well, it's gray market versus black market. You can order, all you want from research companies, and you're not,
yeah,
you're a lot safer, probably legally speaking.
Good point.
Because you're performing research on yourself or the lab rats you have in your basement.
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't heard much on the HGH frag, but then there's always a quality issue with the research chemicals.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's true too.
Yeah, a lot of people now are going to the extent of they're testing, their growth hormone.
Right.
And and of course you can do the quote unquote, what I always kind of call the bioassay that people will do that Latz talks about when we had him before, that they've got extensive testing over on professional muscle. Well, people will go and use a standard 10 IU dose and get a blood work done. You can just basically get a blood growth hormone measurement done.
Yeah, yeah.
3 hours in when it would typically be peaking. And that tells you about how much GH is actually in the product. You can't do that with HGH frag.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
I don't know. I'd have to see the radioimmunoassay. So the HGH fragment is supposedly the portion of the growth hormone molecule that specifically is responsible for the lipolytic effects that it has. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about. Different products, brands, black market, farm, or what have you, that might be slightly shaped differently, or have different chemical modifications on them that cause them to bind differentially to the growth hormone receptor. So the fragment is something that's supposed to bind just in a way that produces the lipolytic effects and not the other effects on connective tissue, what have you. But so if the test that is used in the lab to determine how much of growth hormone you have is binding to that same portion of the growth hormone molecule that is the fragment that you've used, then you could do that kind of a blood test to figure out how much fragment you have. But I don't know what the half-life of the fragment is. It may very well be different than the half-life of the a full-blown growth hormone.
That's a good point too.
So I don't know. Probably, who knows? Half the stuff doesn't work, and the other stuff that maybe people aren't responders, and who knows? They're not using enough of it.
Right.
So I don't know I don't really know much about that. So I would put that one at the last on the list.
Oh, before you go on, I want to tell you, I'm losing you a little bit. You're going off screen. There you go. Thank you. But yeah, fat loss or weight loss. We'll say, let's lean toward fat loss. How about that?
Yeah. So DNP, I've never used DNP. I never found a reason to use DNP. That's the thing that, I would not suggest anyone use, because it's probably the easiest one to die from.
There you go. Yeah.
Albuterol doesn't seem to have any of the effects, at least in the research that I know of, that clenbuterol is known of, as far as repartitioning, fat loss, and muscle gains.
Okay.
Although it's funny, because that was one of those things that a decade ago, it was well, you're wasting your time with albuterol. Mm-hmm. It's a beta agonist. I don't know how specific it is to the beta 2. It doesn't have the same affinity that clenbuterol does, going by memory.
Okay. Which is
how that's clenbuterol's main mechanism of action.
I will tell you this. A friend of mine has fascioscapulohumeral muscular dystrophy, and he is, shoulders, neck, face, and he is prescribed albuterol because there was some research showing preservation of muscle tissue.
And there's some there. We had to I've had to screen that out. When I did my dissertation, people couldn't be taking albuterol.
Okay.
Because it might be affecting muscle mass. So there's some there.
There's something, but
yeah, I just don't think it's it has. It's been so long since I've looked to see if there's a head-to-head trial. looking at the repartitioning effects in cattle or in rats of Clen versus albuterol.
Okay.
It's certainly, I mean, there really is. We have a gigantic experiment going on with bodybuilders, who are going to try everything, and I just, there's not a reputation, and a lot of people have used Clen, and albuterol's been around for a long time too, and I haven't heard about a lot of people having positive effects from that. So,
yeah, me either.
Yeah, it's funny because I mentioned this in my book because it's been substantiated in the research and it's pretty safe. Is ephedrine.
Okay.
You can't sell that as an over the counter. It's it's illegal in most states for treating asthma.
Okay. Is it now?
Dyspnea. Yeah.
It's illegal?
It is legal.
Oh, it is legal. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I know we had it in Michigan still. So
yeah, a lot of states that get your driver's license, they want to make sure you're not buying so much that you're making meth. How all that underground world works. But it actually is. There's some the cardio stimulatory effects, like increased heart rate, etc. Those things will tend to fade over time, but the thermogenic effects do not. There's actually one study on obese women suggesting that it could be increased. Clen can tend to decrease thyroid output, whereas ephedrine increases T4.
Interesting.
T3 conversion, and that was in a study I think with obese men.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they're like those two in combination kind of couple one another fairly well, and it's interesting because there are people that just fucking hate Clen and they do great with ephedrine, and then the opposite is true of others. Yeah,
I have a hard time with ephedra, and just the ups and downs of the short half-life. And I don't know what it is, if it's the way I metabolize things, but I get a real strong burst and then a hard crash from it. Versus Clen, I could take a small dose of it and I don't feel anything from it. So I just would rather go that route.
If people can look up some of the review articles by Astrup, ASTRUP, those are all in my book too, actually. And Dalu has written some cool stuff on thermogenic compounds, but the mechanism of action is actually that ephedrine is stimulating the release of norepinephrine at presynaptic sympathetic nerve terminal. So sympathetic nerves go down, and let's say they innervate a fat cell. So you've got a nerve that comes down and innervates the fat cell, and here's the fat cell and nerves there.
Okay.
It releases norepinephrine, and that tells that fat cell burn fat. Just keep it really simple. Well, albuterol goes in and binds to the beta 2s on the fat cell, directly acts on the fat cell, whereas ephedrine's main mechanism of action is actually, at least from what I've been able to ascertain, it would make sense it might do things otherwise, but it binds to this nerve and stimulates the nerve, the synaptic nerve, and tells it to release more norepinephrine,
interesting.
which is the neurotransmitter of the sympathetic nervous system. And you can find all that reviewed in those review articles and in the discussion, a lot of those studies that have been done with obese women, testing it out. So that is one reason why, like maybe, in your case, something about the quanta of norepinephrine that you have in your sympathetic nerves might be somewhat limited. Compared to someone else.
Okay.
But yeah, there's tons of things. Like Yohimbine's the one that, that I talked about so many times. There are some people who are really slow metabolizers of Yohimbine. Also, yeah, and they're fucked. Like it just takes them days to clear the Yohimbine, whereas the other average person, it might be like a 6 or 8 hour half life. For you, you feel like shit for days. Yeah. I really want to get some like the P450 pathways tested on myself. Because there's something there, because my ability to metabolize a lot of different drugs has been greatly different than other people. There's a drug called Strattera, which is for ADHD. It's a norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. And for most people, it takes 4 weeks for them to start to see a difference. And usually when they take it, 4 weeks later, they say, yeah, I guess in hindsight, I can see a difference. My productivity is definitely better. For me, I take it, and within a few hours, I'm like wired in. It's like night and day. Yeah, so there's definitely the way I metabolize things is unique. So right. And I wonder too, like with your history, which you've talked about,
right.
maybe you've created some epigenetic changes too.
Possibly.
Just, shift your metabolism in that area of nerve transmission.
Possibly. Yeah. What about the he mentions clenbuterol and effects on the heart?
Yeah, there can be some cardiomegaly that comes about from that, like heart enlargement. That's a concern with clenbuterol. The effect on a visceral fat, that exercise will preferentially cause visceral fat loss.
Okay.
More so than just dieting. So if you create a 500 calorie caloric deficit from exercise, you're going to do a better job of mobilizing visceral fat. Sorry, my dogs are running around here. Suki, what are you doing?
I saw her in the background a minute ago.
Yeah, she sprinted by, which is very unusual for her. Hey, Suki, come here.
Come hang out on the show, Suki.
Girl, it's right here. I think there may be someone at my door. Can't tell. Hold on, is my door open? Hold on, I gotta check.
Yeah.
Just a second. Who knows? Like there's snakes that can come in the house. And
oh God!
All sorts of shit. So yeah, I have snakes that come out in the pool. So I am all looking for critters now and again.
I bet.
Yeah. Where was I?
So you were talking about as far as fat loss, and you said
right,
visceral fat and exercise.
Yeah, so it's probably mediated because exercise compared to just sitting and eating less, exercise is activating the sympathetic nervous system. So I don't know. I just have to guess that clenbuterol probably would do a better job, and the sympathomimetics, which is what like Adderall would be, and a norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, or ephedrine, or a beta agonist. Those sorts of things would be the things that would preferentially activate the visceral, or preferentially get rid of visceral fat better than just the diet itself. So that's like kind of an advantage to exercise to some degree, because visceral fat is more problematic from a health perspective than subcutaneous fat.
Okay.
Especially, the idea is that fat is more likely to feed into the hepatic portal system in the liver, and that contributes to blood cholesterol being thrown off whack in a way that predisposes you for cardiovascular disease. So you don't want to. That's like the big apples and pears, right?
Yeah.
Guys are apples, and women are shaped like pears.
Okay.
So there's the android apple, big round in the middle, lots of visceral fat, big belly.
Yeah.
Some of that's just adipose in the subcutaneous area around the midsection, and some of that's adipose in the visceral around the organs.
Yeah.
And that's why men tend to die more earlier than women. Cardiovascular, in general, we do.
Yeah.
But, cardiovascular disease is a big killer, obviously. So having that lower body gynoid fat is not nearly as much of a health concern.
I've noticed with myself, and I truly believe it's the fat around my organs, that when I get lean, it's that my midsection, it gets tighter, but it's in that last month of really suffering that there's no more surface fat there. But within a month, then it gets smaller. And I really do believe that it's like a loss of fat around the organs, because everything just tightens up in a way that's just a really special thing. I haven't gotten, before that, it feels like it's all the surface. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wonder about, because I've considered that too. A DEXA would conceivably pick up on that, but it's still only 2-dimensional.
Yeah.
So it's the X-rays are passing through the sub-Q and then to the. Yeah.
I just thought of something too. So 2015, I was having terrible stomach problems, and after my show, I went in for a CAT scan, and they scanned my stomach, and they scanned all my organs and my liver. They couldn't view the surface of the organs because they said there was not enough fat around them, because they were all pressed together, and there was no fat. They needed fat to keep them separated enough to be able to view the surface. So that was interesting. That's
cool.
Yeah.
But you had the small waist by that time already.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. I'd have to go back in and do it, 8 weeks out, and then do it, and then do it post show or something. Yeah.
One thing, that could be part of it. The other thing could be that your intestines are getting cleared out. You've got, that happens, and you may be intentionally doing that. And also just the fact that you're not eating as much food and your waist is always smaller.
Right.
Because you're never really having a big meal that bloats you, then everything can kind of like settle into it's the opposite of getting pregnant. Like, afterwards you've got all that looseness in the musculature, and women are like, I can't get my abs back because they were so stretched out. Well, this is like basically you've gone from having the off-season food belly to no longer being off-season pregnant, and eventually all the musculature then, shortens down. As I talked about before, like bark on a tree, it conforms itself to the shape that it's exposed to most of the day. And if you always have a small stomach and nothing's in your GI because you're starving, and you're gonna have a smaller waist. But I don't know. That'd be an interesting thing. And then there's, of course, people will point to the growth hormone issue,
right?
And insulin. Insulin is going to tend to predispose for visceral fat, and growth hormone can cause some visceromegaly, increase in the organs as well.
Okay.
And I found a little bit of people always point to this, and I want to there's some possibility of water being in the GI tract, and that's something that seems like it kind of does make sense, because I've worked with some people before who will hold a lot of water from growth hormone.
Yeah.
And when they do drop the water, like we're talking 5 or 6 pounds, their stomach and the midsection gets a lot smaller.
Yeah.
So some of that water may be, there in that area. And as to why that is, if it's like what the mechanism of that is in particular, that I don't know.
Yeah.
Like one thing that's really interesting that, that happens, and I always have to, when I always diet down now, the older I've gotten, is that as you diet down, the connective tissue, the skin, doesn't sort of shrink wrap itself the way it used to. So where that fat once was, now you have space in the connective tissue that isn't filled by larger fat cells. It's a space where the water can go.
Okay.
So it's possible that the water retention from growth hormone is going into the midsection of the abdominal cavity that was once filled by visceral fat that's no longer there because you dieted down.
Yeah.
And it's basically the same phenomenon. I'm just guessing here.
Right,
I like to guess on shit, but it's the same phenomenon that seems like is coming into play with, because you can really see that, like those places that look, you get waterlogged, you have a big meal, or you kind of carb up and you're like, oh God, I gained all this fat. It's like, you can't have gained fat. Like it was only like 3,500 calories. That's caloric balance for you for the day.
Yeah.
It's just water because you haven't been eating that much. You drank a bunch of water. And then when you drop the water, you look phenomenal, as it goes right away. That's just water coming in and out of those interstitial spaces. The same thing can be happening if there was a lot of visceral fat in the off season. And this may be very true. The guys that I'm thinking of, some of them have used insulin in high amounts, which would be something that most of the time you want to, if you're having trouble getting lean, you take that out while you're dieting.
Sure.
You don't want insulin around. So removing the insulin, starting to do cardio, which preferentially causes visceral fat loss, those two things alone would combine in a way such that you're losing a lot of fat from that visceral fat depots, and leaving those spaces while the connective tissue is reconfiguring itself to the smaller fat cells, where water can end up, just because you're retaining water from growth hormone, which you're using continually until you drop it because you want the fat loss that comes with growth hormone. Yeah. So fat loss may not be causing intestinal water retention, which is what people have kind of heard. It may be causing some water retention in the midsection, simply because that's where the fat is being lost from. Yeah. Water is going where the fat once was. So anyway.
All right. I'll see what else we have here. It looks like we have one or two more. This is from Amanda Walls. I'm not familiar with what this is. She says, hey guys, great information. Wondering your opinion on TKD for muscle growth when keto and trying to build muscle, incorporating carbs pre and post workout in training days. Is it also necessary to use carbs on off days as well? Or is it enough to stay in a calorie surplus with the protein and fats? Thanks.
So Amanda wants me to tell her it's okay to be keto. I know this. We've talked about this. She likes keto. She feels better with keto.
Okay, fair enough.
She's a little carbophobic. That's okay. I've been carbophobic before too. I'm laughing at you, man. I'm laughing with you because you know the answer. We talked about this before.
Maybe she was going to get a different answer asking on the show.
She's hoping. It's actually a good thing to explore. And she may have asked this partially just to sort of have me dig into it.
Right.
So let's take the scenario that she may very well be in, where she wants to put on off season. I might know a bit about her situation more than the average person, where she's been eating keto. And she's dieted down using keto, very little carbs, and now she wants to gain. Adding carbs with a targeted ketogenic diet of type approach, so pre, intra, and maybe post-workout for a meal, is a great place to start.
Yeah.
And then you just, as I've always said, you titrate your diet to match your gains. So, like, you wouldn't immediately say, "Oh, I need carbs to grow. I'm going to just switch to all carbs." Right. Just put the carbs in there, and if you're making good progress with those meals, then continue to do what you're doing because it's got you going in the right trajectory. So, and I talk about this in the book, which she has. I've talked about before too. So, over the course of, like, let's say someone has a 9-month off season, they finish basically nothing but a keto diet, and they add peri-workout carbs, and then they add in a meal after that first post-workout meal that's carbs. And that lets them, so the first month, just peri-workout, literally a TKD, pretty much matching what people think of when they think about a TKD, as far as the bodybuilding style targeted ketogenic diet. And then, but they don't make any more gains. Then you'd add carbs into the next meal thereafter, and build those meals up. And that might carry you for 6 months. You might be able to build those meals up and then have a keto pre-workout, and then the days that you're not training.
Yeah.
So you're quote unquote eating keto foods, although you may not be actually in ketosis for, 2/3 of your meals, so to speak.
And you don't have to, I think the fear too, like with carbs and carb phobia, is like that you're going to lose control of stuff, that it's going to spiral, And I think what you're saying is it's a thought out plan. You add this and then you watch the response. There's no point where this is going to spiral out of control, right? You could pull back at any given time, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally it's the same. It's interesting. We get the similar insight into the basic functioning of the human mind, and mind does this too. In this question, as well as the previous question about the Ultimate Diet 2.0, is that people want to know, tell me the exact route from A to Z before I've ever traveled that path.
Yeah.
And we don't know what roads will be available and what you're going to have to do to get there. So you just stay on the road going in the right direction is the answer.
Yeah.
And if the right direction is adding carbs to those meals post-workout, and then eventually 9 months down the road, if you're happy with where you are and you're still in shooting range to diet down for whatever show might be coming, it might mean you need to add some carbs on those non-training days. It could be.
Okay.
It could be that like you find out that carbs are great for you to grow, and that's where you are.
And who knows? You might even diet with them. You might even end up dieting with them. If they're working so good in your off season.
Exactly. I mean, I think she knows, she likes the keto, and it's worked for her, and she's been able to get pretty dang lean that way. So
right on.
So it's a good choice for her. But you can grow on protein and fats.
Yeah.
And a caloric surplus.
That's always the big question, I think. We think like we need the carbs. So you're saying that we don't have to have them.
Well, the last part of her, I would say that as an absolute, like don't universalize that thought, but it's also necessary to use carbs on off days as well. And she's asking specifically about off days here.
Yeah. Or
is it enough to stay in a calorie surface with protein and fats? So, for instance, for her, and she's asking me to tell her, like, basically predict the future. I don't know, because I don't think she's kind of traced this out. But let's say she gets to a scenario where her workouts are at 5 o'clock, and she has a post-workout and a post-workout, which are high in carbs, and she's making good gains there. And she's like, I really like to have my no-carb days. It helps with my energy level.
Yeah. It
helps keep me on track. I like those foods, various reasons. And she's like, well, I'm going to just add a surplus of healthy fats and whatever protein comes along with that on my non-training days as my way to increase the calories.
Yeah.
That could very well work without a problem, because at that point in time, assuming like she's not doing like crazy like 4-hour workouts where her glycogen is just like absolutely demolished, like she's not like training like, you know, full body 5 times a week or something like that. She's getting enough carbs to replenish her glycogen
right
in those meals. Then she's not going to need those carbs on the non-training days. And I don't think she's doing any manual labor. So the carbs, when people say like there's no dietary requirement for carbohydrate because, you know, your body can make glucose from gluconeogenesis, what have you. Well, that's actually true. So she could very well do really well that way with those carbs in there. The carbs have the advantage in that they produce a higher insulin spike. They provide glycogen. Glycogen is good to have, obviously, for training, so you can continue to train hard. If she's getting enough carbs to serve that purpose, those main purposes, and she still can get some growth from protein and fats, then in the surplus, then that may work really, really well for her. And it may be given her psychology, her mindset, everything that she needs to do in order to kind of keep herself on track, because that may be the best approach for her. One of the things that is nice that I always notice too is if I have a non-training day where I don't eat any carbs and I wake up the next day and I'm drier, I look better. And I train usually in the morning. I may have like one meal. Sometimes I train fasted, but you look better after that day. It's kind of like it's a nice thing. It's like those are the times of the week when you look best.
Yeah.
Because you filled up with the carbs the day you worked out. Then the next day you've dried out by eating no carbs, but you're still full because you haven't, unless you've done a bunch of labor of some sort.
Sure.
And you wake up the next day and you look good. Whereas, imagine she starts eating carbs every day.
Yeah.
And she's never seeing that drying out, and she's always got a little bit of a film of water that she doesn't like.
Yeah.
So like she's never getting a glimpse. So there'll be times when she wakes up after all those carbs, like, okay, like I'm watery. It's because I had, 400 grams of carbs last night in my 2 big carb meals. It's okay, because it'll be gone tomorrow. I'm good to go. And so I don't always have like this thing like, is that water or is that fat?
Yeah. Yeah.
She's dropping water repeatedly. I don't know how many non-training days. If you're doing fortitude training, you have probably 3 non-training days a week. So you're getting a glimpse about 3 times a week of how you look when you dropped water.
Right.
As opposed to I'm gaining and gaining and gaining and gaining and gaining. And sometimes and this is what happens when I've been like pushing the calories, to like the 6,000 calorie a day thing. You're always retaining water.
Yeah.
And that's where breathing's hard and you're getting cramps all the time and low back pumps and all that kind of shit. And you don't know, like when I just drop back to eat according to appetite, I'll drop 10 or 12 pounds in 2 days.
I bet. Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't know how much water is there. So this gives you like a little bit of more of an insight as to what's actually happening with your body composition, because the water is coming off on those days, and it's also just nice to see.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a psychological advantage, and I tell you what, as I've said before on here, like if you have, people who are like if their psychological limit is 12% body fat, and after that they just don't like how they look.
Yeah.
They will self-sabotage in some way, shape, or form, either consciously or unconsciously. They won't let themselves get any fatter. They just won't.
That's interesting. I've thought about that a lot since you've said that. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I mean, like they won't want to do it. But just hypnotize that person and say, motherfucker, I want you to be the biggest. I want you to be a walking human eclipse.
Yeah.
Big, fat, strong. Like, oh my God, like you're just like a mountain. You're like the juggernaut. Like no one's stopping your ass, no matter where you want to go and what you want to do. That person's going to want to get big. They don't care. They're going to, just like powerlifters have that mentality. Mm-hmm. Just fucking beast out in every way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
That's completely the opposite of like, oh man, I don't like how my belly's bloated and I'm waterlogged.
Oh yeah.
I like the fat and like, God, I wish I were lean again. I want to start dieting again. And that's why people they'll jump off. They'll go back and forth. They'll gain for about 12 weeks and then they'll diet down and they never get any progress on the long haul. So anyway,
it's a good one.
So she'll have to figure that out as she goes along. So, but some carbs are going to be needed at some point in time, just because you need them to train hard.
Yeah.
So I think she knows that. We've talked about that before.
We got one more. We'll wrap the show up with this one. This is from Christian Ramirez. He says, When do you recommend the use of metformin in bodybuilding, since there are talks that it slows down IGF production?
We've kind of covered this one before. There's some nuances too as to whether where metformin is impacting AMPK, AMP kinase. So it slows down IGF production. Metformin is it's a glucose disposal agent. Has a multitude of actions. Actually, it has impact on liver in terms of glucose production, so it lowers blood glucose in that way. It has an impact on the target tissues for glucose disposal by activating AMP kinase. It actually, and some people just kind of claim that most of what it's doing has to do with the microbiome. That it shifts the microbiome, and that's been demonstrated too. And shifts in the microbiome will change the glycemic index of a given food and glycemic responses to food as well. So from like kind of where rubber meets the road, and this is in my book as well, where rubber meets the road perspective goes is that basically it's insulin sensitizing, and it's doing that by turning on the energy sensor of the muscle. Think of skeletal muscle here, kind of focus, AMP kinase, and that's what exercise does. So some people find that they can do, and that's what cardiovascular exercise does in particular, long-term increase in energy expenditure mediated through AMP kinase. It's turning on all the things that are involved with sensing and energy demand. So we got to increase oxygen consumption and burn calories. Basically, metformin and glucose disposal agents are having at least part of their actions in that same way. The glucose uptake is a function of having a cell that's sensing that it needs more fuel, so it takes in the glucose.
Yeah.
So you're turning on the same mechanisms as you with metformin as you are with from the sort of the microscopic view of AMPK. And we know some people can and some people can't get away with doing cardio, aerobic exercise, and weight training without sacrificing their gains in muscle mass. Some people, like Jose Raymond, was someone I know has done cardio for some preps, and then there were times when I think Chris Aceto may have had him doing like 2 hours, and his legs, before he had kind of all the issues with his joints, were just badass, no matter what. He just his thighs were just ridiculous, whether or not he did cardio. And some people, like, they start doing cardio and they just lose their leg size, and whether that's, they're not adjusting their training to counterbalance that or what have you, but they experience that interference effect from concurrent training, which is pretty well documented in the literature. You try to combine strength training and endurance training, and the endurance training will hamper the strength and muscle mass adaptations. But the strength training doesn't seem to slow the endurance. So that happens for some, not for others. Same thing goes with metformin from what I've seen. It's very, very analogous type of situation. So I think that Ken was someone who said he used to get flat from metformin, and he'd take it. It's like that. Well, it's a glucose disposal agent. Shouldn't it be increasing glycogen synthesis and like filling the muscle up? Like, well, it's bringing the glucose in. In his particular case, for whatever particular reason, it's doing that because it's increasing the metabolic rate of the cells. It's turning on the energy sensor of the cell, so it's gobbling up glucose. He probably was ending up with less glycogen when using that. Than someone else might have.
I've seen that with glucose disposal agents, metformin, or myself with berberine, where you could tell I felt it, less glycogen, less pump, everything. Yeah,
so that makes sense given we know how it works. Some people could get away with it, some people can't. So if you're someone who is, and I always, just because people resonate with this, if you're like an endomorphic kind of person who tends to have lots of body fat. Not that those somatotypes are, we can hang our hat on the hook of those somatotypes so much. But if you're someone who has a problem with losing fat and you hold your muscle mass no matter what, then metformin could possibly be to your advantage for insulin sensitizing.
Yeah, okay.
Insulin sensitivity seems to go hand in hand with body fat loss. It's certainly not a bad thing to be insulin sensitive.
Sure.
If you're someone who is was called string bean all throughout elementary school.
Yeah.
And you can't gain muscle mass no matter what you eat. And you're like, I always eat so much, and you can eat McDonald's or whatever, and you don't gain an ounce. Metformin is not going to do you any good, probably. It's not going to be your, yeah. And metformin, I mean, people will use it. It's used to treat diabetes, because the main issue there is thought to be, of course, glycemic control, especially if you're type 1 diabetic. You've got to have your glucose under control. But insulin has other actions that make it anabolic, per se. So I'm not saying we should or shouldn't do insulin, but the point I'm making is that metformin shouldn't be considered like analogous to insulin. It's not. It doesn't have the anabolic actions, the anti-catabolic actions that you see with insulin.
Yeah.
It's acting in very different ways, and it's not binding to the insulin receptor that I know of. So it's not like insulin in terms of, people take insulin and they eat a bunch of food, they'll get big and they'll get fat.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a way that wouldn't happen with metformin. So if you not that you should do this, but if we just took berberine or metformin in your case and just swapped that with insulin,
right,
you would not have seen what you saw.
No, God, no.
Complete opposite.
Right,
yeah.
Right, exactly.
So that tells you right there, especially for you, like those are totally different drugs, even though people say, oh, they're both glucose disposal agents. But it's just, that tank and that Pinto are both green.
Right.
But they're very different vehicles.
Right. That makes sense.
So, yeah.
Well, this is good. This is I would consider this Q&A to be a success. This was fun. We got to kind of pick your brain and hear you answer some stuff on the fly too.
It's still in, yeah. Come out.
And so you're off for to look at some trucks today.
Yeah, we'll see. I've been probably getting messages. I'm trying to find an old, people like cars, like the old Ford F-350s. Actually, just up to about the first half of 2003, had this 7.3 liter V8 Power Stroke engine, which, like, you can just go onto YouTube. It's like considered sort of mythical, and that they just don't fucking break down. Yeah, it's a diesel that just goes and goes and goes. And there were some emission standards that changed in 2003, and Ford had to switch to a different engine, a 6.0 liter, and it's got better power, but they had to re-engineer it, and apparently they didn't do a very good job. It's like one of those things they just had, they wanted to continue to sell trucks, so they whipped that up, and you can actually get stuff done to quote unquote bulletproof. It's about $5,000 to $10,000, and you can get all this shit done, some of which is illegal in many states, to make those 6.0s work. Okay. It's weird. You go on eBay and they'll say bulletproof truck. Yeah. It's like basically saying illegally modified truck, come buy it. Yeah. But I don't know. Maybe once you pass the emissions, as long as you don't go to another state and where you have emissions, you probably be screwed. Yeah. But the 7.3s run for forever. So these the ones I've got my eye on, 2 of them, and both of them have about 400,000 miles on them. Okay. But they'll go for 800,000, and I don't drive that much. Wow. Really, I don't drive much during the day, just when I take my road trips. So I'm getting I'm going to get a big old diesel truck and throw a truck camper on the back of that. I'm condensing all my shit down, and that way I can travel with the pups. Nice, man. Well, that'll be cool. That'll be the back seat. Yeah. That'll be fun. Yeah. All right. I'm expecting my computer. I have a half hour. And then I'll be recording another podcast with just sitting in the background for that one. Ron Partlow and Dusty Hanshaw are going to be doing their next installment of It's Just Bodybuilding. And guys, I want to give you a heads up for anybody that's still listening to the end of the show. We're going to be putting together a new media outlet. So stay tuned for that. There'll be more information coming out about that in the not too distant future, but definitely stay tuned, because there's going to be some transitions coming up. It's going to be fun. There's going to be new stuff. It's going to be old stuff. It's going to be a lot of stuff. Everything that you guys have always enjoyed, plus some more. So more to come on that. Scott, thanks for your time, man. As always, I got a message from Mario. He said he got hung up with something happened, an emergency with a client, or with a I'm sorry, not a client, but a patient. So he was not able to get with us. He was still available, but we'll try to catch up with him for next time. So cool. It'll happen. Yeah, I'm sure it will. For another episode of Muscle Minds with Dr. Scott Stevenson, I'm Scott McNally. Go to fortitudetraining.net.
BYOBBcoach.com for the Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach book. You can also get that at Barnes & Noble or Amazon. It ships internationally or domestically, of course. You can get the hardcover at those two sites that I mentioned last. And of course, go to TrueNutrition.com. You can use both of our codes, Advices, or you can use Advices Oats for their oatmeal blends, 25% off. Scott, thank you as always.
You're good, my man. Yeah, you're welcome. See you guys.